It's interesting when you talk about AI. I don't know, any of us really know exactly what's going to happen, but it's going to completely transform how we do work. And one of the side effects might be is that people don't need to be as skilled in a particular thing. And it's going to highlight the emphasis on having good integrity, good attitude, good EQ, IQ. So these raw core qualities that can then be applied to anything.
Work is changing, quickly, irreversibly, and often invisibly. I'm Chris Fanchi, and this show is about understanding where it's headed and how we stay human in the process. Hello and welcome to Human Work After AI, the show where we explore the future of work, technology, and what it means to stay human in the age of AI. We speak with founders, technologists, and thinkers who are navigating the shift toward an AI-powered economy. Today's guest is Fletcher Wimbush, CEO of Discovered, a hiring platform and service that blends AI-driven recruitment automation with deep, science-based talent assessments. For over a decade, Fletcher has been helping CEOs and business leaders stop winging it and start hiring A players on repeat through a system that filters for integrity, attitude, emotional intelligence, cognitive ability, and proven performance. He's a passionate advocate for rigorous, structured hiring processes and the belief that better people mean better business. Fletcher, welcome to the show.
Great. Thanks for having me, Chris.
So after that introduction, I'd love to start with your origin story. What first got you interested in technology, and specifically what first drew you to talent assessment and hiring?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of a long story, but I'll try to make it as short as possible. But my father created these really cool assessments, as you highlighted, and they're highly focused on integrity and attitude and the soft skills, as well as, and I would include cognitive ability or an aptitude as a soft skill, but it's kind of a hard skill in some ways. And I always had fallen into these natural leadership roles. I was captain of the football team, student body president, vice president of my fraternity, always like the lead at my entry level job. They always just sort of, naturally push me in that direction. So I'm a high D or high I and DI on the DISC scale for those who are kind of familiar with that. So I fell into those roles, and my dad was a researcher, a scientist type mind, and he created these cool assessments, and he spent a lot of time talking to me about just how to be a good human being but a leader, because he was a business coach and he had developed these tools. And I fell in love with the idea of like, well, if as a leader, the only thing I get right is hire great people, then everything else just is easier, right? Now, I'm a little older now, and I've been a leader for a long time in various organizations. And I realize, there's lots of things you have to do to be a great leader. What has held true is you get the right people on the bus, it's a hell of a lot easier to win and way more enjoyable too. As we've all experienced having a problem generator or a talented terror on our team, and the headaches and the frustration and the emotional toll that person takes on us as a leader and all the other people that they touch with inside the organization. So I'm forever committed to that. And it's interesting when you talk about AI, I don't know, any of us really know exactly what's going to happen, but it's going to completely transform how we do work. And that probably is going to, one of the side effects might be is that, people don't need to be as skilled in a particular thing. And it's going to highlight the emphasis on having good integrity, good attitude, good EQ, IQ. So these raw core qualities that can then be applied to anything, right? Going to become even more valuable than they always have been in work. So that's kind of what led me to it. And then 13 years ago, I took over the assessment business, and not wanting to be a consultant because I'm a high D, I don't have patience for people's incompetence, even if they're paying me money to tell them what to do. Right. I really, gravitated towards an idea of like, I want to create products that help support those best practices and to help facilitate and to help people, solve their own problems. So I want to teach you how to fish versus do the fishing for you, kind of a deal, and give you the best fishing rod possible to do that. And that transformed us, a few years ago through, a lot of hard work and learning and practicing and developing, turned into the Discovered product, which, is a recruitment automation and talent assessment platform that is supports all of the scientifically based best practices in talent acquisition.
So were you always following part of the family business, or did you kind of go your own way before returning to doing the talent assessment approach?
Well, my father was wiser than me, probably, and I wanted to get involved in the business like straight out of college. And he told me no. He probably told me no, I don't know, half a dozen times throughout my early part of my career. So yeah, it forced me to go out into the real world and get like, real jobs. Now I was lucky to have another family member give me a very entrepreneurial start. We opened delis in front of Home Depots. If anybody's from NorCal, they would know these installations. And he had gotten this contract, and he sent me and my college roommate, my best friend, out to New York to enterprise, and basically gave us a check and some a sounding board, and like let us have at it as these 21, 22-year-old guys. And so we had really great entrepreneurial experience there, building little businesses, and we were building them, running them, and selling them. And not ultimately didn't know what the hell we were doing, but again, we had some good advisors and backing and direction, but he gave us a lot of freedom to be very creative and very entrepreneurial in that role. And so we learned how to strengthen. We began building our entrepreneurial muscles there. And then I ultimately, in 07, 08, 09, ultimately, we were really hit hard in that downturn, and that business became less viable at least for me. And I moved on to work as a mid-level leader in a privately owned commercial dish machine company. And that's a whole nother story, but that's really where I got to practice what I preach. It was injected into a much, much larger, very large organization. And I took over the worst performing business unit out of 100, and I took that into kind of the top echelon of performing business units, and then was promoted, and I took over the third largest market in the country as a kind of next level of a leader. And I had manufacturing, service, and sales under my purview throughout those different roles. So I had a variety of roles that domains that I had to be great at leading. And many of those people continued on with that organization for a long time, and elevated from entry-level roles into leadership roles. And one of those people is now like, one of the top, handful of executives in the company, and a great friend, so that's the power of, now that I'm old enough, I get to see the power of great hiring and what that has to have on an organization. And, that legacy still lives on.
Hmm. Did you always have that entrepreneurial itch, or was that something that you kind of developed as you were put into those situations?
Well, yeah, I always wanted to, and I probably always knew at some point I would be my own boss or entrepreneur, some sort. Yeah, I mean, I was raised with entrepreneurs all around me, I guess. And so, but, again, they were wise enough to give me guardrails, or force me into situations where I had to get some great experiences. And I learned a lot from those. And I found myself in great situations where I was able to learn a lot, that experience with Autoclore, the commercial dish machine company, privately held, extraordinarily successful. This is the kind of company that Berkshire Hathaway would drool to buy, type of quality of organization. Those are things I never would have learned in a smaller entrepreneurial environment that is given me a great backbone for going out into the world and helping others, right?
So let's talk a little bit more about Discovered. So who is your ideal client? Who are you guys typically working with? What kind of businesses do you work with?
Yeah, I mean, for all intents and purposes, we're just still sort of startup-ish, I guess. We service about 400 or 500 customers, so it's not nothing, but we're not some huge client. We're a bootstrapped organization, and probably always will be. Frankly, I love the Canva model. I love the Stripe idea. Now I think they've taken some money, those companies, obviously, but this concept of like, we're not trying to go public anytime soon. That gives us full control over our business. We're not beholden to anybody else. And also, we only need our own little slice of the world to make an impact in. And, if that becomes a Canva level of impact, then phenomenal. And if it's something smaller, then no problem. I sort of forget the question, but I guess what is driving at, right, is that we're still at that SMB side. 50 to 250 employees is kind of our target. We're not going after enterprise. We have no immediate desire to go in that direction. We like helping that market.
Are there certain industries that you find your platform works best with, your solution?
Yeah. Well, so construction is our biggest sector by far. So that has a diverse from frontline kind of labor, trade type hires that are needed to professionals, construction management professionals. And so we really get to stretch and do, solve the entire problem in an environment like that. A lot of financial services, other professional service type environments. About the only sector we don't play heavily in is tech, frankly. Uh, but now
Interesting.
with the changing market, we probably will begin to play more because unfortunately, like in financial services, a great example. 20, 30 years ago, people went to college to become accountants and lawyers and financial analysts. And now those careers have sort of become less sexy as the boom of tech has come out. A lot of those people, instead of doing those jobs, became software engineers. And now that the labor market there is softening, that the talent pool has risen to a certain amount, now AI is beginning to affect those jobs. The good side for the employer is, well, you get to be a lot more selective in who you bring into your technical environment, which means you're going to get better talent, and that the people who are not really that good are struggle. Frankly, they're not going to get those jobs. It's Discovered is great for that. In the sense that it's going to help. Where there is a moderate demand and moderate in an appropriate pool, you can get those candidates through a very systematic process with very little human touch. You can do a one to many, type of approach to hiring, which is, for an SMB is really, really important because leaders in SMB, they just don't have the time or the bandwidth to interview 20, 30 candidates for a role. And that's frankly what you often should be striving for, but it's out of reach and many times.
Yeah, certainly. Talk a little bit more about how your platform does that and what who really benefits. How is this helping with the hiring process?
Yeah, so I think, the entire organization ultimately benefits. You get a much higher quality hire and done a lot faster, right? The candidates, love, hate it. I mean, you're going to get a response. You're going to figure out where you stand in this process very quickly as a candidate. So you're going to invest a little bit of time into answering some questions, telling them about yourself, providing maybe some references, doing a video interview one way, like, being able to come and share and showcase a video resume, if you might want. I like to call them that. That's a good way. Candidates are out there, people looking for jobs. If you're asked to do a one-way video interview, think of it as a video resume. You get to showcase your talents in a different medium versus a piece of paper. That is really difficult, by the way, for hiring managers to really decipher whether or not you're any good.
Mm,
Resume doesn't do anybody a lot of justice ultimately. As a candidate, you submit a resume and I look at it and I go, I don't know. And I have opportunity costs too. I'm like, do I spend 30 minutes talking to Chris? Nah, it's easier to say no to a piece of paper,
mm.
right? A lot harder to say no to a human. So I think the candidates ultimately get a fair shake. And also those who, again, maybe who aren't on paper the most, maybe check all the boxes, gives them an opportunity to showcase those soft skills and who they are. And so I think it's a great thing for candidates. Now, candidates don't love investing a lot of time. Everyone wants immediate satisfaction. Just give me the job, right? Why do I have to jump through these hoops? But it might begin to change some of your mindset, if you're thinking about how some of these types of assessment tools or, more asynchronous selection processes can give you a shot where otherwise you'd had no shot because no one was going to talk to you just based on.
So that brings up an interesting question. Do you see the resume kind of eventually being phased out as we get to the point where AI can judge a video just as well as it can a piece of paper? And a lot of times these resumes, you're automatically disqualified if you don't have the right keywords in the top half of the resume and things like that. So do you think that will eventually phase that out?
I don't know. I mean, they've been around for a long time. I mean, I would be, a huge fan if everybody had a video resume and, you were able to send a video to. I recommend this to job seekers. I mean, I wrote a book during COVID, 50 million people lost their jobs, and I have a lot of people come to me asking for career advice. I don't give career advice. don't come calling. I will send you my book that I wrote because, but that's chock full of phenomenal advice from sitting on the other side of the table here. Like, I'm the one evaluating candidates constantly, right? So that book is flipping all of that on its head. Well, you want to get past me. Well, this is what you need to be doing. And also just great life advice that, in general, because it's a human thing. You're stressed, you're financially hurt. But one of my favorite pieces of advice in that book is create a video resume for yourself, showcase, like, again, a lot easier to build a connection with a human than it is a piece of paper. So I'd love to see it head that direction. If everybody's LinkedIn profile had a video on it, so that would be, I think, a really smart move.
Yeah. I think from the job seeker standpoint, we're seeing so much of the algorithmic sorting, and you've got these quick applies and things. I think at this point, most job seekers probably assume that stuff is just automatically going to some kind of a trash heap at this point. So I think
Yeah,
finding ways to stand out is more difficult than ever.
yeah, definitely is. I mean, look, it's a double-edged sword. Well, we made it easier for you to apply for jobs, but that also makes it harder for you to stand out as a candidate, right?
Right.
Don't be lazy about your job search at the end of the day. I mean, we see candidates all the time who, push back about having to take, a number of steps in a hiring process. And it's like, I'm sorry, but, you realize you're competing against like 400 other people. So like, I got to have some mechanism here. And, if you get to do that on your own time, then I don't know, but it doesn't get much better than that, right? Like, you can do it at your own leisure. You can accelerate this process as fast as you want. So now, if I'm a job seeker, I'd be going direct to my, to my dream job and just knocking on their door. I had lunch with a CPA, or breakfast with CPA this morning, a friend and a client of mine, and we were telling our life stories, and he's like, I didn't really have great jobs or great, grades. I was kind of a, maybe, not the pedigree that the big CPA firms wanted. And, he saw a newspaper ad for a tax seminar, and he's like, I want to work in this industry. And so he paid $3 to go to the seminar, and he shows up to the seminar, he sits through the seminar, and he goes up to the guy at the end and he hands him his resume and it says, hey, I really would be interested in working for your firm. Are you open? Are you guys looking for any? And the guy's like, we're not hiring. But he thought about it for a second, but he's like, what, you came here just to give me your resume? All right, why don't you come in on Tuesday morning and we'll talk? And he gets the job, right? Like,
Wow.
that kind of stuff, that it's still relevant.
Yeah.
Go above and beyond if you really want it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I think that feels like the direction we're heading in a lot of ways, is that personal connection is becoming so much more important as automation takes over
Yeah.
so much of our lives, right?
And we're in a place, 2021 was brutal, right? Like, people would just hire any warm live body that would show up, and that was a side effect of COVID. But we're back to like 2019-ish type of labor markets, and again, the labor market is very different even than there, but it's softened to a point where there's a lot of competition. So again, if you're an employer, you need a really strong systematic way to process as many candidates as possible in order to find the diamonds in the rough. And to do that as a human being, it's virtually impossible. I don't have time to interview 20 or 30 candidates, right? And I don't have time to hire somebody to do that, or can afford to, because that's very expensive for me to do. So having tools that, accelerate the process, that are based on science and statistically proven to match the right person, the right job, right? To navigate candidates through that process is like pennies. I mean, the tech is like, costs like virtually nothing to use. So like, why wouldn't you be doing that? And for the foreseeable future, the labor market is going to be like this. Employers are going to be overrun with talent. And the only exception is that in some cases, there are pools of talent that are extraordinarily small. Tech is also going to help with those in terms of helping source and engage those people, where there's only 50 people in a market that are qualified to do that job. But those talent pools, situations, scarcity problems are lessening every day as we go forward in this current economic, environment that partly is driven by AI, I would imagine.
Yeah, definitely. How has your business evolved from the time of your father's management consulting
Yeah.
to what we see today?
Yeah.
I'm sure there have been a lot of changes.
Yeah, I mean, he was a coach, and then he developed these assessments, and assessments used to be scored and using like Excel, and then sent via fax and fax machines. So if anybody's out there, I don't know, under the age of 30, that's how we used to send emails, is via these things called fax machines. And I used to score them, as a kid. That was like I'd help out, like help like score them and like create the report and like fax it back to the customer, right? Um, and then when I took over, obviously we were in a digital age at that point, but then the technology's gotten better and better. It's better user experience, more input, more dynamic, more we can interact with the content in a more diverse way. Now we're creating content around assessments using AI, which allows really flexible, dynamic conversations about the assessment results that you can engage at a deeper level, where all that was programmatic in the past, which gave you great insights, but again, a little bit limited how much we can tell you about somebody. There's a lot to say, but we can only say so much in a programmatic way. Um, but ultimately, yeah, it went from we were purely a talent assessment company to now we are full on, end to end recruitment automation. And we brought in all of additional assessment tools, things like reference checking and video interviews and candidate scorecards. And I mean, every single one of these things are in the top, like, 6 most predictive things you can do to make a hiring decision. And we put it all into one platform and automated most, if not all of that. And now AI is assisting with personalizing and evaluating and helping you dig deeper into this information that's being collected in and throughout the process, right? And so, I mean, it's completely night and day from, just here's a test to we just solved the whole problem for you now.
Yeah. How quickly did you embrace AI? Is this something that you've been utilizing in the platform since before the generative AI boom, or is it a more recent addition?
Well, there's always been AI in like job postings and resume screening was AI before AI was popular. I mean, there was some of that stuff going on. I remember when I hired Weston, he's our product manager, CTO, as an intern. That was like 10 years ago. We started using AI or dabbling with AI to help us figure out algorithmically the correlation between people's assessment results and their performance on the job and things like that. So, we had always been dabbling, in figuring out how to leverage it and use tools like that back, before, I don't know what, 3 years or four, was it 3 or 4 years ago when ChatGPT came onto the scene. Now, obviously, when ChatGPT came on the scene, I like instantly fell in love and, wanted to marry them. And very, very quickly implemented additional tools into the platform and continue to do so this day, and very excited about what hiring will look like in the future, driven and managed and scored and by AI.
So, what parts of the hiring process do you believe can be fully automated in the
All of it,
next
the entire
all of
thing,
it?
the entire thing. Now, I think human acceptance is going to be, probably the harder part. So I'd probably give it a 5 to 10 year window where, you know, uh, in the future, some roles, not all, but many of the frontline roles, many of the, you know, high volume hiring type of situations could be fully automated. Candidate goes through their own experience. Again, one to many, they're getting content delivered to them, customized to them. They're querying the content. Like, is this job right for me? What do I want to know about it? Tell me what the benefits, tell me what a day in the life is, show me what a day of life is. And the AI is also navigating them through the evaluation process and then ultimately making a decision. And, it's getting you set up to start on day one and coordinating all of that. Now, all of that is possible today, frankly. Again, I think the human adoption and acceptance of that and improving the candidate experience so that they also want to be active participants in that process and can find value in that process as much as the employer can. And so it's a delicate balance for sure in that sense. I think today what we see a lot of it is almost a lot of the pre-vetting. So first interview, reference checks, behavioral integrity and skill and work knowledge components of the evaluation are all being done up front, and simply, hiring manager reviews all of that, says, I want to interview Chris, clicks a button. It then schedules you for an final interview, and I get to meet you. We talk and I make a decision. That's already happening today.
But you think that even that final interview and decision process can eventually be automated?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting.
So how are AI tools or your assessments able to judge things like culture fit and personality, some of that emotional intelligence, things like that, that can impact the ability of a person to fit in within a workplace?
Yeah. Well, integrity and attitudes are simply, they're exactly what they sound like. These are belief systems that people have, right? You think of these contexts of like half glass full, half glass empty, personal responsibility. So simply asking questions in these veins, people will just tell you straight up. One interesting product that we acquired a couple of years ago was called an integrity first. It's an over integrity test. And this is one's kind of a prime example of how people will just tell you who they are in many cases. And this one is typically used in blue collar, frontline environments. It screens candidates for drug use, on the job drug use, theft, lying, and hostility. So some hardcore stuff that unfortunately employers have to deal with. Candidates will tell you, I smoke pot at work. I've never heard an interviewer ever ask, Chris, do you smoke pot at work? Right?
I'm going to say no.
You're going to say no, please. Yeah, please. But first of all, I'm probably kind of embarrassed to even think I have to ask that question. But the reality is, we all know, we're all thinking in the back of my head, I'm like, oh my God, is Chris going to be a reliable guy? Is he high? Is he going to do something? That's in blue collar and frontline environments, that's extraordinarily dangerous, right? You're a cook, you're a driver, you're hammering nails or doing electrical work. If you're high, that's dangerous, man. Like for the other people around you as much as it is for yourself, right? And then, things like lying, Chris, have you told a white lie in the last 90 days? Have you?
Of course not. Never.
Okay. Do you ever drive above the speed limit, on the highway or anywhere?
Not at all. I would never.
Have you ever hurt somebody's feelings?
Of course not.
Have you ever made a serious career mistake?
I think we all have at some point.
So right? If you tell me no to all those questions, what do I now know about you?
Not trustworthy.
Yeah. You're not telling me the truth about something. I don't know exactly what.
Yeah.
Look, if you're the guy who never drives above the speed limit, fine. Now, it's not one time, if that's your thing, you don't do that. But, again, if I ask you all those questions and you keep telling me no, you're telling me you're a liar and I can't trust you. And those are human things that you're unwilling to admit to, then what else are you unwilling to be honest about? And the answer to that question, unfortunately, is all sorts of terrible things. I don't want to be, I don't want you in my environment. 12% of the population will fail an integrity test like that. 12% of the people believe it's better to lie about being a human than it is to be honest. 6% do heavy narcotics or use drugs and alcohol on the job. I know this because we've done it with millions of people. And we've just asked them point blank, and they tell you in high stakes environments like trying to get a job. So the numbers are probably much higher than that, but so that's how you figure out these things, right? You just ask people, and you ask them enough times and enough ways, and there's no trick to it. There's nothing tricky about those questions. I just asked you.
Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. It's really interesting. So I'm curious, from a job seeker standpoint, I know everyone's experienced that feeling, and especially nowadays, it's not even rejection anymore. It's just you don't hear anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so with all of these assessments, what kind of feedback are the job seekers receiving? Are they getting informed of where they might have fallen short or things that they could maybe work on?
Yeah. I think that's where there's a great opportunity for AI. I think, as employer, recruiters, you probably You deal with so many applicants. Like, how did I give everybody feedback, right? Like, I just don't have time for that, right? And it's not maybe necessarily because I do or don't want to give that feedback. Is I really just don't have time for that. I got like a lot to do here, right? And so there's a piece of that. I mean, I think good employers at least give people some level like of rejection, let them know, hey, Chris, I mean, we're not moving forward with you, that, and do that hopefully in a fairly prompt way. And then the side effect for the rebound of that is they get a bunch of hate mail in return. So then guess what they don't want to do is they don't want to say anything at all. So then the rest of the people, so few people spoil it for everybody else. So if you're a job seeker and you get rejected, and whether you get great feedback or not, don't be a jerk. Like you're just making it shitty for everybody. Obviously vice versa, an employer, you should at least at minimum let people know, hey, we've decided to move on a different direction there. And get over it that you're going to get some jerks that are, going to send you some hate mail and be mean about it. And I think with AI, though, you have an opportunity to be able to provide some very constructive, safe. So from an employer perspective, to give feedback to you, Chris, why I'm not going to hire you is very risky, right? If I say the wrong thing, my frontline manager, my HR person, my recruiter, like, I don't know if they're qualified to give you good feedback. Like, you really don't. Like, they say the wrong thing to you, like, you're going to sue.
Yeah.
And so it's better to just say the minimal and to CYA. And, that sucks again, because bad apples, right? Who are going to say, well, they said this about me, or they said this, instead of taking that as constructive feedback, they take that as the cue to go call their lawyer. So now nobody gets a lot of great feedback. Now I think with AI, I think, there's going to be that's going to be part of that enhancement of that candidate experience, is that the AI will give you some constructive feedback and also maybe some career job seeking tips, right? They'll maybe get a little more value out of this experience, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely the legal side of things is unfortunately what makes it so messy and so difficult for companies to provide that feedback. So how do you avoid any kind of biases that might find their way into the AI?
Yeah, I mean, same way you do with anything else. I mean, you measure for it. You understand how, the level of bias that is there. I mean, there's rules around this. Long-standing, legislation and Supreme Court rulings on these things. Like, look, there's bias in everything. So as long as it's not gross, then then you do your best to get as close to zero bias as possible. Humans are the most grossly biased. In my opinion, these tools are exponentially better than leaving it to the humans to do it. And so I think the question of bias comes up. People, well, there's bias and there's bias. And well, do you want to do it the other way? Like, you're crazy. Like, you want to leave this back to a fully unstructured human to human process where the human evaluating on the other side is grossly biased and sometimes just outright discriminatory towards people. Like, no, you don't really. I'd much rather take it out of their hands as much as possible, and to help try to mitigate that as much as possible. And that's what a lot of these processes do. No matter how well-intentioned somebody is about being biased, it will give the evaluator a gut check. Like, I thought Chris was terrible, but this is saying he's got a lot of positive attributes. Perfect example of that is like introverts. You ever meet an introvert? They're quiet. They don't give long answers. They're fairly short. They're succinct. You might ask them a question. They might take a lot of time, some time to think about it. Might 10 seconds, 30 seconds, to give you a response. In the workplace might be a few days, might get to give you a thoughtful response. And that's, can be discriminated against in the sense of like, this person's not smart. They don't think fast enough. They're not very charismatic. They have no personality. Like, they're accused of all these things. But the reality is those people who are highly conscientious and therefore usually often very introverted are statistically their best performers in most jobs. And in the vast majority of jobs need people like that in them. And I'm judging you because I don't think you're fun enough to talk to. Like, what the hell?
Yeah, no, that's not the way companies should be evaluating talent, certainly.
But it happens every day.
I'm sure it does. So you say you focus on finding the top 1% of talent. what makes identifying and attracting those people different from filling average roles?
Yeah, I think a big piece of that is, as an organization, you need to have a compelling offer. You need to be going to market. So recruitment marketing, and that's a big part of what we do. So there's kind of two pieces of what we do. One is we teach organizations how to attract the best people, because you can't hire the 1% if you're not getting them into your into a conversation, right? And then number two, once you've identified the pool of talent, then how do you verify that you have identified that person, right? And then that the top 1% is relative to where you're at in the marketplace. So again, if you're going to pay in the bottom 30th or 50th, the biggest mistake, oh, we're competitive, and they pay in the 50th percentile, then that means 50% of people are more competitive than you. And yeah, you might be 50% more competitive than the other 50%, but that's pretty average. That's a C minus at school,
Mm,
right? Like, not super impressive. So the top 1% for them is different than the top 1% for Meta, who's paying $100 million a year for AI engineers, right? So
right.
it is a bit of a relative thing. So first is understanding your mission, your core values, what you have to offer, what your value proposition is. And based on your value proposition, then what does that allow you to who does that allow you to engage? And from that, who are the best of the best in that scenario, and helping kind of create that metric, I guess, per se, right? And so recruitment marketing, though, is getting to people in the right places, delivering the best possible message. We create recruitment marketing content and videos for our clients as part of the program. And so sharing that message, telling that message, resonating same way, one to many. And that then makes the best people say, hey, this is more engaging than that boring job ad that the competitor is. And it allows me to self-select in and say, I like what I'm hearing here. I like these value systems. I want to be part of supporting this mission. And that goes a long ways to getting the best of the best engaged. And then when it comes to sourcing candidates, we give you all the tools to identify people with the exact same skills and experience that are needed, so that you can hone in on those folks and go knock on their door. And because they've done, clients have established a great value proposition, when they go knock on that door, they're coming with a message that's well received, right? And therefore
Mm,
more likely to get a conversation started.
okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So, what are the areas where most companies tend to go the most wrong with vetting candidates these days?
Well, everything starts before you start, so I don't know, Ben Franklin said, failing to prepare is preparing to failure, and probably some other smart people said that, right? And I mean, it's so true in everything in life, right? And any endeavor that you go forward with. So I think most companies fail to be good at vetting candidates because they don't know what good looks like. They haven't taken the time to identify what their ideal candidate actually looks like, and how they behave, or what kind of background, or what kind of history, what kind of skills, what kind of aptitudes, or behaviors that person exhibits. So then they get into an interview, and then they're just making decisions on whether or not they like the person. And whether they like them or not is so grossly biased based on nothing, on my life experience, on my perception of what good looks like, which is oftentimes totally off, totally wrong, right? So yeah, you really got to take that step of getting crystal clear on what good looks like. And then you can calibrate your interview questions, your assessments, your reference checking activities, your working interviews, your project-based interview, whatever all the different things that you should and will do, whether it's some or all of those things in the process. You can then be targeting the outcome, what you learned from doing that, against what your ideal candidate is. So I think, yeah, people just skip all of that step, and they just say, I need to hire a salesperson. The resume looks interesting. I talked to the person. I like them because we're both Giants fans, and off we go, and we hope for the best.
Well, it's so interesting. So, in these podcast episodes that I've done, ultimately, it usually boils down to, we're going to keep the human in the loop somewhere. Usually, the final decision maker, maybe the beginning and end of the process, there will be a human involved. But it almost sounds like in this circumstance, you kind of think the human should be taken out of the loop, that it would actually benefit both the employer and the candidate to remove the human from.
I think at some point, as we become more and more effective at leveraging these tools, it is going to be a real possibility, and it is going to happen in some classes of workers. Yeah. I don't know that it's going to happen for all of them, not in the next 10 years, but maybe eventually, right? It'll be completely AI, but no, I think it's going to be, again, we're already at minimal human in the loop, capable of executing, doing this well at minimum human in the loop. So yeah, it's kind of a bold prediction, but I think that it's gonna head more and more in that direction as we become more and more accepting of it. I mean, we're already becoming more accepting of the car drives itself, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll let you out of here on this. What's one principle or lesson that you think will always matter in hiring, no matter how much the technology changes?
I mean, Warren Buffett. I love this quote. It's in my signature. I share it with everybody. Hire for integrity, motivation, and intelligence. And if they lack the first thing, the other two will kill you. So really smart, motivated people will be your demise. But those three things, that's it. So nowhere in there I said experience in the job or trained to do it. Now, again, in some cases you need that, but that's the minority of jobs, not the majority.
Integrity, motivation, and intelligence. I like that. Fletcher, thank you so much for coming on the show. I think this was a fascinating conversation. Thanks for sharing your story about Discovered. Where can people find you and learn more about your company?
Well, I was blessed with a unique name. You can Google me, find me on LinkedIn, send me a message on LinkedIn, Fletcher Wimbush. Just type it in there. You'll find me. And you can learn more about Discovered at discovered.ai and check it out if you are looking to streamline some of your hiring process.
Fantastic. And to everyone listening, if you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to share it, leave us a review, subscribe so that you can hear our next episode. And as always, stay human. Thank you for listening to this episode of Human Work After AI. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast provider so you never miss an episode, and we'll see you next time.